Good evening. How is everybody today? We are in how many weeks has this been? It's been about 5 weeks of isolation. Now, for me, I'm actually in a quarantine right now, and so my family can watch me at the window behind me. Of course, the shade would have to be open. But for our Bible study today, I'd like for us to look at the book of Hebrews, chapter 11. And where we're going to start off at verse 23, and we're going to go up to verse 29. Let's see. Steve Montgomery said 33. I'm not exactly sure what that means. But hello, Lauren. Hello, Steve. Hello, Jody. As we look at this, I want us to keep in mind of what faith is. Again, let me just remind you, faith is not wanting something to happen. Faith is not a desire for something to appear. Faith is when God promises something, when God speaks, and we believe it. Now, it is, hello, Charlotte. Hello, Ruth Ann. Hello, Jennifer Smith-Miller. Now, here's a reality. That you'll have faith healers. Have you guys seen that nut, Kenneth Copeland? Coronavirus! I don't even know what that's all about. The guy's nuts, okay? That guy is not of faith. Matter of fact, he's the opposite of faith. But faith is when God speaks, I listen, and I obey completely despite the consequences. Now, I want us to look at something here about faith that's going to maybe rock your world. Maybe it's something completely different of what faith you thought. Look at verse 23. By faith, Moses, when he was born, was hid 3 months of his parents because they saw he was a proper child, and they were not afraid of the king's commandment. Now let's stop there. By faith, what did they do? By faith, they hid the child. And that's interesting. You know, a lot of times you would hear people say, well, if you're going to walk by faith, if God tells you to cross the street, you could do it blindfolded. Actually, that's not what we find here. What we find is a belief in what God says and acting upon it, and also taking precautions for it. Now, it says that by faith they hid Moses 3 months. How is that by faith? How is hiding a child faith? Now, let's stop for a second. What did they have faith in? Did God promise that all the children of Israel would be okay? No, that was never the promise. What was the promise? The promise was twofold. Number one, remember the promise is that the seed of Abraham is going to bless the world, and that went through Isaac, and that went through Jacob, and that went through Jacob's 12 sons. Now the next thing that they believed is that when Joseph brought them into Egypt, it was told that they would be in Egypt for 400 years. Now here's the reality. At that time of 400 years, do you know what Moses' parents expected? They expected deliverance. That's what God said it. They had faith in it. They believed in it. It wasn't just some abstract thing that everything is going to be okay. No, that wasn't the case. It was the fact that God was going to keep his promise that in 400 years they would leave Egypt again and go into the promised land. Egypt was a pit stop. Sorry, I just brushed my teeth and I can't do a thing with them. So with Egypt being a pit stop. I'm going to stop saying that, okay? But that was for 400 years. That sure did seem like a really, really long time, and it was a long time. But God's promise wasn't any less true, and so his parents hid the child. Not because they were afraid of the king's commandments. No, because disobeying the king of Egypt, Pharaoh, disobeying the king would have been a death sentence. No, they hid the child, not because they were afraid of what the king would do. They hid the child because they believed God was going to act, and they were preparing. Do you believe in what God has said? That's just a reality. Do you believe in the scriptures? Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't, right? Well, the promise here is that we need to walk by faith, because without faith it's impossible to please him. And so it says, by faith, Moses, when he was born, was hid 3 months. Now look, let's keep on reading. Verse 24. By faith, Moses, when he was come to years, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to suffer affliction with the people of God than to enjoy the pleasures of sin for a season, esteeming the reproach of Christ greater riches than the treasures of Egypt, for he had respect unto the recompense of the reward. By faith he forsook Egypt, not fearing the wrath of the king, for he endured, as seeing him who is invisible. Now there's a whole lot of stuff right here. Let's unpack this. We know the story. We know the story that Moses was in the basket, in the ark, if you will. Pharaoh's daughter took him, adopted him. I'll tell you what's a blessing is Moses' mom was the wet nurse. Still stayed with the family. God apparently honored that. But he believed God. You know what he believed God? He believed God that Israel were the promised people, not Egypt. He believed Israel was the chosen of God, not Egypt. Let me try to make this in practical terms. Christian, do you ever just feel like, that if you got called home today, you'd want to take some stuff with you? That things in this life are really, really important to you? You know what that is? We believe that this world is more important than our heavenly home. We believe that God's word is wrong. Paul said that the sufferings that happen today are not even worthy to be compared with the blessings that await us in heaven. See, Christian, we either are going to believe God or we're not going to believe God. That is the issue. What do you believe? See, Moses, even though he had royalty, that wasn't better than being where God said he should be. It continues that it says that he chose rather to suffer afflictions with the people of God. Now, Moses had some issues, and this is beautiful, because Moses was a man of faith right then and there, and yet he had anger issues and he murdered. None of that is good. Please, don't say, well, I'm just a man of faith, so I'm going to be angry at everybody and kill people. No, that's not a good thing to do. And this is videoed, so you can't say that I said it was good. So there. Now, he chose because he believed what God said. He believed that Israel was the promised people and not the luxurious life of Pharaoh. Christian, what do you believe? Does this world have your attention? I'm going to start meddling here. You know your kids have survived without missing church? Do you know your kids have survived not needing to go to sports? Do you know how many people I talk to whose kids don't go to church because of sports? See, in reality, you think that's going to be more eternal than your relationship with God. There are so many times that the things of God get forsaken for the things of this world, and the things of this world are worthless. They're vile. They mean nothing. And I would much rather suffer with the people of God than live like a king without the people of God. Have you missed the fellowship of believers? I know I have. But what will it be like when in 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks they say, okay, everybody back to living again, start work again? Now, some of you have been working continuously. I see a couple of people on here that are still working just as hard as ever. You know, when things go back to normal, what are we going to go back to? Can I keep going? It says that he'd rather be with the people of God than to enjoy the pleasures of sin for a season. And here's the reality: sin is pleasurable, but only for a season. And then the bill comes due. Verse 26, esteeming the reproach of Christ greater riches than the treasures in Egypt. You might say, Christ, well, hold on a second. This is Moses. What does this have to do about Jesus? Don't forget, he believed the promise of God. And it was a promise that the anointed one, the Messiah, the Christ, was going to come through Abraham and then through all of Israel. The God in flesh was the promised one, the Christ. Somebody asked me just today, one of my dear friends from university, she contacted me, and she had one of her students begin to talk about that one of her students mother has cancer. And she said, what do you say to somebody whose mom has cancer? How do you make sense of it? And I said, the reality is I talk, I listen, I tell them how much I hate cancer. I said, but that life doesn't make sense unless you're a Christian. And I began to explain that life is short, and Christians understand that life is short. Life is very short. And that what we do now will put eternity into perspective. The Bible says to store up treasures on earth. Listen, if life doesn't mean anything now and the Christian's just going to get everything, why would he say store up treasures in heaven? And I began to explain to her what the Christian belief is about sin, about this sin-cursed world. Because she said, so is God giving people this, because of their sin? And I said, probably not. It's just that this world is cursed by sin because of all of our actions. And I was able to explain that God, the Christ, came, born of a virgin, lived a sinless life. I explained a little bit about what Easter is for. That time when that perfect God became the sacrificial lamb for all of us. That whosoever believes in him will not perish but have everlasting life. And she says that I think I probably should become a Christian. I didn't become a Christian so everything will work out okay, because it won't always work out okay. I became a Christian because the God of the universe loved me so much that I could not reject that kind of love. He loved me, and I certainly didn't deserve it. And he thought that the riches he would have in Christ, so much better than any riches you could have in Egypt. What was available to him? Everything. Absolutely everything. Have you ever played that game? I wonder what would happen if I had different parents, or I lived a different life, or I was rich and famous. I'll be honest with you, it doesn't matter. This life is tasteless. This life is colorless. This life has no meaning without Christ. I mean that. The Bible continues, it says, by faith he forsook Egypt, not fearing the wrath of the king, for he endured and seen him who is invisible. Now, it's interesting. It says that he forsook Egypt, not fearing the wrath of the king, and yet he went running. When it says that he didn't fear the wrath of the king, the whole purpose is that he feared God more than he feared any man. Now, I see too many people that don't. I see so many people that fear circumstances, fear bills, fear work, fear everything. And they don't fear God. Ladies and gentlemen, if you don't fear God, you fear nothing. And you give more respect to people that one day will become worm food, that have no bearing for your eternity. They have no bearing on whether or not you have peace. I'm in quarantine. I'm in quarantine right now. And yeah, these walls seem to be getting really, really small lately. But you know what? There's joy. Because my environment doesn't give me joy. My relationship with Christ is what gives me joy. Verse 28, through faith he kept the Passover, and sprinkling the blood, lest he that destroyed the firstborn should touch them. Now that's interesting. By faith, he kept the Passover. What was the Passover? The Passover is when they took a lamb, a spotless lamb, and they killed the lamb and they put the blood on the post of the door. Now, I'm going to be really honest with you. God told them, get ready, pack up everything and get ready to go. And this is where faith comes in, because when God tells you to do something, if he fails, if it doesn't come about, you're going to look like an absolute moron. See, faith never fails. That's important. That's the reason why these false prophets, these false healers, these guys know nothing about faith, because what they talk about doesn't come true. Again, I'm thinking about that false prophet, that heretic, Kenneth Copeland. Guys, he said in March that the virus was now destroyed. You can't trust him. You can't believe what he says. Therefore, we know God isn't speaking through him, because if God was, we should take everything that is said to the bank. And you can't trust anything. I heard somebody say, that actually they're pretty good, because almost 50% of what they've said has come true. 50%! Now that by God's standard, that's a false prophet. See, faith is believing God. And when they killed the lambs, when they put the blood on the doorposts, when they packed up, I want you to know that if God did not act, they would look like the biggest fools. Moses would be a false prophet. Who would want to listen to him? To do something so ridiculous as that. And I bet you while they were doing it, people were mocking them. Until the firstborn started to die. See, if they didn't live by faith, their firstborn would have died too. God doesn't play games, folks. Nothing else pleases God other than faith, believing Him at His word. By faith they passed through the Red Sea as by dry land, which the Egyptians essaying to do were drowned. As they went out, as they left, as they were doing exactly what God said, God lovingly and mercifully trapped them between the mountains and the sea. And they were in a trap, and Pharaoh's army was coming and would wipe them out or put them back into slavery. See, faith, true faith, is always there because it's always reminding us to trust God and not trust other things. You know, you see at that moment when you read the scriptures of people wanting to turn back, of people thinking they were going to die. And the Red Sea was split in half. And the Israelites walked on dry ground. And they made it to the other side. Pharaoh's army was held back. And then once Israel was safe on the other side, here comes Pharaoh's army marching through the Red Sea. And still, very possibly, people are like, oh no. Oh no. They're doing the same thing we did. It's almost as if God got them out on Passover, and God took them to the Red Sea, and God allowed them to pass through the Red Sea just to make them die? Just to make them become slaves again? No, that's when God shows up. And as they were going through, the waters filled the empty space again, and they died. Now, I've heard some people say, actually, it's a translation issue. It's not the Red Sea, it's the Reed Sea. See, it's just an extra letter. It's really easy. Look, that might make sense in English, but it doesn't make sense in Hebrew. Okay? So stop. But if you want to go there, I'll go there with you. You know, because people say, oh, the Reed Sea, it's really, really easy to cross. You know, there's plenty of spaces where you won't even get your feet wet. Look, okay. If you want to say they passed on the Reed Sea, that's even a bigger miracle than through the Red Sea. Why? Because that Reed Sea where you could pass by on dry land, there's only an inch of water in some places. All of Pharaoh's army got drowned in that. Now, do you see why when we just try to explain God away, it doesn't make sense? Christian, when you have faith, it doesn't mean that your faith won't be tested. And it's not being tested to make you miserable. Your faith is constantly, maybe tested is the wrong word, maybe renewed is a better word. God allows you to go through challenges of faith so that you know that He's trustworthy. Guys, let's stop trusting in ourselves. Let's stop trusting in all these things. Look, people want to put their faith in sports, gone. People want to put their faith in entertainment, gone. People want to put their faith on Broadway, gone. People want to put their faith in whatever, gone. Stock market, gone. Whatever, gone. It takes a little invisible virus to make everything disappear. Christian, that's why we need to trust God. Not for some pie in the sky, but because it is the only thing that makes sense. Trusting God is not the last resort. It is the only thing that makes sense. Every once in a while, somebody will say this to me. You know, just wait till your kids get out in the real world. And I think to myself that the person who's saying it, they don't even get what the real world is. Because they try to live in a world where they say that they make the rules and God doesn't. No, may I say the only real world that we can even experience is where God is in control. God makes the decisions and we obey. Let's be like Moses. Let's walk by faith. Let's believe Him. Let's forsake the things of this world. Let's forsake the mundane, the tasteless, the nothing. Let's be a people of God. God has been so gracious. He's given some of us a breath. A time where we gird up our loins and start doing what we should be doing. I love you guys. God bless you. Sorry there's no music today. Time just kind of got away from me. I wasn't able to put everything together. But I love you. God bless you. And I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. By the way, a few things before we completely go. If you're watching this and you have anything to say to anybody, listen, you know what I'd love? I'd love for you to make a recording on our Ebenezer page, on our Facebook page. Put up a little video. Let people know that you're there. If you have questions, contact me. If you can, many of you know Israel from our church. It was his birthday. I'm sure as a teenager he loved having a birthday at home all by himself. Let him know that you love him. As with all these things, we are stronger as a church, not because of our desire, but because of who God is. God bless you guys. All this will be going up on YouTube, and then links will be sent out. So God bless you.